Clock. Shall we get started? Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to the second annual Entrepreneurship in Libraries Conference, Part 2. The purpose of this free mini conference is for librarians who support entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship around the world to have an opportunity to connect, share, and learn with each other. This conference will specifically explore approaches libraries have undertaken to support social entrepreneurship. Given social entrepreneurship's emphasis on improving and strengthening its communities, it is inherently linked to many of the values and goals of librarianship. Social entrepreneurship is a globally relevant issue that is not centered in the global north and/or the Western view of capitalism, lending itself to an international conference. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you find this conference educational, thought-provoking, and also action-oriented, as well as a networking opportunity. My name is Summer Krstevska. I am the Business, Economics, and Data Access Librarian at Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, United States. I am one of the co-chairs for this event. I would also like to take this time to acknowledge and thank our planning group who have made this workshop a reality. Can we go to the next slide to display our amazing planning group? Here's the planning team. We have members here from various countries: India, Canada, Nigeria, Iran, and more. We're very grateful to all of them. Even though we have this broad planning group, the EntreLib conference and its workshops are officially a service of BLINK, which is an acronym for Business Librarianship in North Carolina, a section of North Carolina Library Association. We just want to take a few minutes to learn a bit more about you and who's here in the audience. So if you could tell us in the chat your name, the organization or institution you work for, and what country you are from, we would greatly appreciate it. Let's get to know each other. And while you're doing that, I'm going to pass the microphone to one of the other co-chairs of this conference, Reese.
Thanks so much, Summer, and I'm looking forward to seeing where everyone is from this time. So I'm going to do a short code of conduct reminder, and I'll share the code of conduct link in chat, but I'll also go over some of the highlights just while we're getting some things in here. So let me just put this link in chat. So each EntreLib participant has the right to learn, network, and socialize in an environment of mutual respect and professionalism, free from harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. Creating this environment is a shared responsibility of everyone involved in EntreLib events. So please feel free to contact the EntreLib co-chairs via Zoom chat or email if you believe you've been harassed or that a code of conduct violation exists. I'm going to paste our names and email addresses in the chat. We've got a little bit more housekeeping as well. During the speaker talks, please keep your and we'll try as co-hosts to mute anybody who maybe misses to muting themselves or forgets. Please keep your video off unless you'd like to turn it on when asking a question. Comments and questions are welcome anytime in the chat box, so please feel free to do that throughout the whole session. During the networking time, please feel free to leave your mics and cameras on if you like. All the sessions will be recorded and shared later. If there's some problem with the Zoom room, or if people start using it incorrectly, we'll shut it down and we'll email you a new Zoom link right away. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Sarah to introduce our first workshop.
Great. Thank you so much, Reese. I'm happy and honored to introduce our first workshop. It's Sustainable Solutions Using the Impact Gaps Canvas as a Research Tool, presented by Amanda Wheatley, Liaison Librarian for Management, Business, and Entrepreneurship at McGill University. If you have questions for Amanda during her presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll help moderate the Q&A at the end. Are you ready to go, Amanda? Great. Go ahead and share your screen and then take it away when you're ready.
All right, thank you so much. So hi, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good night, or good morning, depending on where you are. So I'm Amanda. I'm from McGill University in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. And today I'm going to be talking about the Impact Gaps Canvas and how it can be used as a research tool for topics on social entrepreneurship and sustainability. I'll go over the Impact Gaps Canvas. I'm going to connect it to evidence-based practice. I'll talk a little bit about how I've taught with the Canvas in the past. And if we have time, maybe we'll even test it out ourselves. So I have links in the slides here, and these can be shared. And of course, if you Google Impact Gaps Canvas, you'll get back to this site. Now, what is the Impact Canvas? Well, it's a tool that is designed to help people learn about a problem. Before they jump in and try to solve it. And it was created by Daniela Patty Thornton in about 2016. And the idea here is to really map the landscape of a problem and identify paths towards new solutions. So here's the canvas. So you can see our left-hand side here where we do all of our challenge mapping, our right-hand side where we do all of our solutions mapping, and in the middle here is where we connect all of our gaps. And now the actual Canvas worksheet is available for free. You can download it online. It's really easy to build into online mapping tools like Miro or Jamboards or even a Zoom whiteboard. So definitely something that anybody can kind of just pick up and run with. Now, how does it work? So essentially on each of these different columns, you're going to be filling in content, and the Canvas first addresses the challenges. So seeks to understand what are the problems, who's impacted, what's the current status quo of a given area, and then how could people be negatively impacted if the problem was solved, which I thought was like a really interesting frame for these challenges. Like if you were to put in solutions, what might the impacts in a negative context be, as well as a positive context, and what other issues might come up with the problem, what's the history surrounding it. And then on that opposite side, on the solution side, looking at what's been tried and have those ideas worked, why and why not, how are those solutions possibly connected, and who do they serve, who do they leave out. So it's really quite a thorough process of looking at each of those different areas. And then the idea is that as the entrepreneur, or as the researcher, that you're finding the gaps in between and figuring out how you can better address that problem that has already been done. I think it's a little bit more impactful than, say, looking at like the business model canvas, where we might address problems and solutions in our value propositions or our key activities, because these are mostly explored from that industry or consumer perspective. And they don't often think about things like a challenge where somebody is negatively impacted by your product or service. They're not asking entrepreneurs to address those kinds of key issues. And the same with something like a concept map, which can be a really useful tool to highlight the flow and progression of ideas and visually organize our thoughts. But it's not really solutions focused the way that the Impact Gaps Canvas is. And the same with like a stakeholder map, which I know we use quite a lot with our entrepreneurs here on our campus at McGill. I don't know if others are also using these, but I think this is looking at all of those impacted parties, but it leaves out a lot of the core problems and why they exist in the first place. It takes away the history of that. So you can see how separately all these different maps and tools might come to those conclusions, but the Impact Gaps Canvas really asks you to face all of those at once. So the benefits of using it are that you're not just focusing on one problem or challenge in a given field, and that you're getting the user to confront the pros and cons of all solutions, that you're considering the stakeholders and their impact, and you're seeing that visualization aspect. So that's kind of my pitch for why you should consider using the Impact Gaps Canvas. Really quite an easy tool. Now, when I've used this in the past, it's been connected to a specific course, which I'm going to talk about in a few slides. But how I think it really makes a big impact with students in particular is by applying it from a lens of evidence-based practice. And so kind of to address evidence-based practice, if this is something that doesn't get talked a lot about in your area of librarianship, I don't think I talk about it all that much in business. It tends to come up, I think, a lot more in health librarianship. So if you're not familiar with the term, it boils down to good quality decisions being based on a combination of critical thinking and the best available evidence. And this is particularly useful in terms of social entrepreneurship, where the goal is to address and solve problems with a global impact. And it's also a natural fit for sustainability, because when we think about that large scale problem solving, we want researchers and entrepreneurs who are using evidence-based decision making. So by applying evidence-based practice with the impact gap canvas, I think it holds a little bit more weight. Now, the specific article that I'm referencing here, which is Evidence-Based Management, the Basic Principles, goes over 6 different skills that are needed to align to evidence-based practice. And those are asking, which is translating a practical issue into a problem. Acquiring is systematically searching and retrieving evidence. Appraising is critically judging the trustworthiness and relevance of that evidence. Aggregating is weighting and pulling together the evidence. Applying is incorporating the evidence into the decision-making process. And assessing is evaluating the outcome. And if you're thinking, all of these 6 themes sound very familiar, so do I. So here is the ACRL framework for information literacy. And I think there's actually a really natural fit for the 6 kind of skills or pillars, I guess, of evidence-based practice. And so when I teach this to my students, I often use this frame here of information literacy and evidence-based practice connected together. And I don't know about you, I don't get to use the ACRL frames all that much when I do entrepreneurship. I tend to just focus on market research tools and practices and strategies. And information literacy doesn't really get connected to that all that much. So being able to take some time with students or with my startups and kind of address this way of thinking is really helpful when they actually sit down to fill out the canvas. I think they have a bit more of a research background than when they go to do it. So all of that being said, how do I actually teach with the canvas? I will show the LibGuide that I made, but just for some context, the particular course that this map is, that the Impact Gaps Canvas is used, is BUSA 434, Managing for Impact. This is an upper year undergraduate course in the Faculty of Management at McGill University. It's open to students in the Integrated Management Program or those who are pursuing a sustainability degree. And the course includes the evidence-based practice lens because the students are being taught to kind of foster their research skills. And throughout the program, they actually get to go on to be paired as a research assistant to a faculty member at the university. So they're really aiming at becoming more information literate through the whole program. Now, in the particular assignment that they do, they're actually assigned a sustainable development goal, and then they have to come up with a product or service or solution that they kind of want to build from there and apply that and their SDG to the Impact Gaps canvas. So one of the ways that I break down the searching for them and is kind of taking it one kind of column of the Impact Gaps canvas at a time. So we first start out with challenge mapping. And here I have actually sustainable development goal number 14, which is life below water. And I'll show the example in a bit more in depth what I do with the entrepreneurship students. But in this type of searching is going to be very familiar to everyone, where we start out with our basic concepts. So they pick keywords to do with their challenges, the effects of those challenges, and the relationships or the stakeholders. And then they do the same thing and build all of their keywords. So very kind of basic searching. And then we get into Boolean operators. Usually at this stage, a lot of them are not actually familiar with this type of searching. So this is kind of all brand new to them. And I think it works really well for the challenges aspect because that type of content is usually pretty well documented in our academic journals and newspapers. So going into like a ProQuest or an EBSCOhost database for something like this usually lets them get a lot of good coverage for the challenge column. Where things kind of differ is with the solutions. And so I give them a couple different areas. So this is a couple different methods that I put on the guide for them to do solutions mapping on a local level. So I go over how they can Google search for local research think tanks or institutions, nonprofits, and other kind of local government initiatives. We talk about advanced Google searching. We talk about using the Google News portal as well and all of its features. And then when we look at globally, we do a lot of the same sort of steps, except for we also consult a lot of different country reports, and that's because their assignment usually includes a country analysis as well. And actually, I can show in the LibGuide itself, so this is the guide that I kind of teach off of. I don't often bring slides to my classes. I usually build my content right into a LibGuide. And so this is what we talk about in the class. We start off with the impact gaps canvas. We go over all of these core areas, and then they get all of that same kind of content. So the challenge mapping, we go over how to pick out their different concepts and their keywords, how to build their Boolean operator searches, and then they're given suggested databases. And then for their solutions mapping for the local efforts and global efforts, they have here examples of projects or sustainability projects that are happening in Montreal, usually because they are told to pick something local that they can actually try to implement. They're kind of encouraged to take these projects and build them forward, maybe create their own startup out of them. It's kind of part of the program that they're in, that they're kind of trying to foster that. And so they get each of these steps within the guide, and we address those. The other thing that I do for them as well with the sustainable development goals is we actually have each of the 17 listed here. And under each one, it actually connects back to other subject guides within the library where they can kind of figure out how to find more information on those topics. So especially if they're business students who aren't familiar with, say, agriculture searching, then they're able to go into the agriculture guides and have quick access to all of that without having to feel lost in like the database's A to Z list or any of the other LibGuide features. So the aim theoretically is to try to make it as easy as possible for them. I don't always know if that's accomplished the way that I want it to, but we try. Now, one of the really cool things that we actually do with the Sustainable Development Goals, so in this particular class that I go into, we use life below water. And for me, it's a little bit of a cherry pick because the research institution that I demonstrate is actually called Experimental Lakes Area. And it's a place that's very near my hometown where I grew up. So I'm very well versed in the activities that go on there. I've actually had a chance to take a private tour of the facility and go visit. They have 58 small lakes and watersheds that are actually preserved for scientific research. The entire institute was founded in 1966, originally as the Freshwater Institute, and it's now been taken over from the International Institute for Sustainable Development. And on their website, they list all of their publications, all of their open data sets and interactive tools that have come out of their research. So for a student to be able to go in there, get research, open science research as well, and kind of see the real world impact of that, it's really quite huge. But the example that I like to show with them and why it can be so important with the impact gaps canvas is a particular study that was done in these lakes where they broke off a lake in half. They added phosphorus to one side of the lake. So you can see that's the northern half here where it's all green. And there was a clear presence of algae blooms. It erupted. It started destroying the natural ecosystem. And this was back in like the 80s. They were trying to figure out what was going on with all of these algae blooms happening all over the world. It wasn't just in Canada. It wasn't just in northwestern Ontario. And they found out that it was actually coming from daily use household products like detergents and dishwasher soap and cleaners that had high amounts of phosphorus in them and were being put back into our water supply. And so through this research institution, they went and they lobbied for new legislation around the world that actually reduced the amount of phosphorus in products. And from that, so many startups came up with these new clean products that were reducing the amount of chemicals in household cleaners, and they were trying to create more and more eco-friendly things. And so I think it's a really kind of useful way to inspire students to say, okay, look how we can take some of this research that's happening in these fields, maybe outside of the traditional business topics that they're used to studying, and see how, and then see outside of traditional journal searching as well, and see what these research institutions are doing and how we can learn more from them and how we can come up with sustainable solutions from them. And so the idea is that they would go out and find their own research institutions on a local or global level and help take the solutions and the challenges from those topics and find their gap for their project. Now, whether or not that works, like I said, is still up in the air, but I feel like the project's going well so far. And I'll actually show to you the experimental Lake's website if anyone is interested in ever using this. It's really quite neat. Actually, if you go into their science and data page, they have all of their different research projects. They'll highlight their different publications are actually on here. So I really like showing students that as an example of, oh, wow, you can see the PDF list. So anything currently in press, anything published, and this goes back, oh gosh, I think it goes back pretty much to the beginning. Yeah, we're back into the 70s. So there's so much content here. And I think it's really useful for students to see just how robust and impactful that is, and that they could take kind of challenges and problems that were found within this type of research, and they can think of solutions, and then they can start to think of how they could use their experience as business students or entrepreneurs to then come up with new global solutions for these types of things. I also like in here in their data section, like I mentioned, they actually have different ways that you can go into their interactive data portals. You can actually do data requests directly from them. You can go in and take a look at specific projects. So it's really quite neat to see. And so I like to encourage them, again, this is just the example that I showed in class, but to find other research institutions that are putting open access publications or contributing to open science in general. This is, I think, a really nice way for them to like bridge that entire social sustainable kind of theme that's happening with the Impact Campus. Now, kind of keeping my eye on the time here, just because I did have a little bit, I guess, Impact Canvas of our own that we can test out. I'm going to actually throw this in the chat here. I think sometimes nice to see this kind of stuff in action. This is a Padlet. Feel free to open it if you'd like. I'm gonna zoom in here to see if maybe we could do our own Impact Canvas tonight. And I know for some people it's probably close to bedtime. I know I'm a pretty early person, so if you don't have your thinking cap on, that's okay. But I thought I would propose if anyone here had spotted some challenges in entrepreneurship, librarianship, or any solutions that they've seen recently. I know for one, a challenge that I can add is collections / vendors and commercial use. I feel like it's such a gray area when it comes to entrepreneurship. I know that's one of the challenges that I face is walking that gray thin line of how we're using content sometimes, which is why I love going to open science sources like the Experimental Lakes area. If anyone else has any challenges or solutions that they've seen. Ooh, understanding financials, lack of niche market information. I've had to deal with that so many times this week in particular. Professors encouraging primary versus secondary research. Awesome. So we've got a lot of problems, I feel like. Has anyone learned any solutions perhaps from this conference? I know I really enjoyed the lightning talk the other day on social listening and seeing all those different tools. I'm sorry, I really can't remember the names of the people who presented that. But that was really neat to me to see a new way of kind of looking in on niche markets. And of course, if you have any questions as well about the Impact Canvas or how this would all work, I feel like for librarians, it's really easy to think, oh, like how we would robustly go about researching all of our challenges and solutions. For students, I think for them, seeing it so comprehensively for the first time can be a little bit frightening for them. I know when I go into these classes and I teach them, I think it's like the first time that they're really understanding what it means to be information literate and like what it takes to have these like more progressed research skills than they would normally have to use in their undergraduate courses. So that's kind of, I guess, the trade-off of this is that it does require a lot of really intense research, but I think it's worth it because of what you're getting out of the campus. Okay, seeing some great solutions in here for open access content, encouraging states to have open data sites. Yes, definitely. Community relationships, including free open source instruction and making them easy to identify in research guides. Awesome. And I'm going to say for my gap here, in the gap that I see is that we have not enough EntreLib conferences. We need more of these more frequently, one every month. I don't know. I feel like this is a really great way, I think, for us to like help bridge these gaps. Obviously, there's definitely more things that we can be doing. But I don't know if anyone else sees any good ways to bridge those gaps. I'm all ears. Oh, I love unrealistic expectations. Read librarian capabilities in time. Oh, that's so true. Or entrepreneurship classes for development for librarians. Yeah, I love all this staffing. This is great. So one thing I'll say about the impact canvas too, if you're thinking of using this, not very many libraries have documentation on it. And I can actually show you here. I thought it's really funny. I'll go into an incognito search, even though I know this isn't completely foolproof in terms of cookies and hash and abs. Oh, here we go. Impact canvas. So if you scroll down here, the McGill guide is actually what, like fourth, fifth or something like that in the search. U of T just bumped me out, and I will say Carrie had actually emailed me about my Impact Canvas guide, so I feel like in a way I'm taking ownership for U of T's guide bumping mine out on the search results in Google. But for the longest time, I actually started getting questions from people all over the world. How do you use this guide? They could not find any information. There was no support at their university. I run like a social media reference service. And so the top question that I got on Instagram was just, what is the Impact Apps Canvas? How can I use it in my assignment? And I'd be like, oh, great. Like, are you a McGill student? They'd be like, no, I'm like from Florida State University. I had one, they're like, no, I'm in Denmark. I had one, they were like, no, I'm at HEC Paris. And I was like, where are you finding? So more librarians, I think, need to be documenting the Impact Apps Canvas. And I really love to see Carrie's guide here for U of T. I think also, if you're looking for other examples of how you can incorporate this on your website, I think it's so cool to see how this is done. And I've actually heard that Map the System, I just got an email yesterday about Map the System and how they're using the Impact Apps Canvas. And I hope that means more libraries are going to start kind of connecting with it. Because it is, you can see here, there's so many guiding questions that really allow you to look at this research from a different lens than you would get, again, with a traditional business model canvas, or using, you know, a stakeholder analysis, using concept maps, any of those other types of mapping tools, because it is so solutions focused. So it's perfect for social entrepreneurship, perfect for topics about sustainability. Just seeing if we've had anything else here added to our Padlet. Budget. Yes, I feel like budgets is a good gap. I definitely could use an increase in my entrepreneurship. Right. So I do want to open the floor in case anyone has any questions. I know we have another workshop to get to here in just a few minutes. I can leave my screen up if that's useful for people too.
Thank you so much, Amanda. That was awesome. I am so inspired by everything that you just talked about, everything that you're doing with the Impact Gaps Canvas. And that's pretty cool that you're like the expert according to Google. So I'm sure you're getting so many questions. And I'll just say on my part, I think this is way more accessible for students than something like the business model canvas. I think that can be a bit overwhelming and intimidating. This is a little more pared down and I think easier to grasp. So I'm definitely going to try to incorporate this in my instruction and on my guide. So thank you so much for that. Yeah, so we do have about 5 minutes left. So if anyone does have questions, feel free to put it in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask yourself, you're welcome to do that. I was also furiously adding links to the chat for all the sites that you showed. So everyone is gonna, your guide is gonna get so many hits, as well as Carrie's from University of Toronto. So everyone should be bookmarking those. I know I did.
Yeah, Carrie's is great. I think she had emailed me, maybe it was like a year ago, and she's like, what is this? I've been told I'm like supposed to do something. And I was like, here's what I figured out. And she took it and just expanded, and it's amazing to see just more people interacting with it and all the great content that she put on her guide. It's truly inspiring.
Wonderful. I think that's sort of the best way, is learning from fellow librarian colleagues. I know I've added stuff to my guide actually from one of Carrie's guides, and give each other credit, and it's just spreading the wealth. I like that. All right, well, we can kind of continue on then and make sure we have time for the rest of our sessions. You can, of course, continue to add questions to the chat, and we can always address those during the networking session at the end. Thank you so much, Amanda. I will turn it over to Edward.
Hello. Our second workshop for the session is Businesses for a Better World, using the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, in the first year experience program. And Wendy Potier is the business and economics librarian at the University of New Hampshire. She's unable to join us today, so we will be playing a recorded video. I think Celine is probably trying to arrange that, and we will be happy. Or you can reach out to Wendy. I think she'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Again, feel free to type your comments and questions to chat, and I will be your moderator for this session. I think we're ready to go.
Hello, my name is Wendy Pothier, and I'm Associate Professor in Business and Economics Librarian at the University of New Hampshire in Durham, New Hampshire, United States. I welcome you to my talk, Businesses for a Better World, using the UN Sustainable Development Goals in a first-year experience program. I first want to start off before I get any further is to say thank you to the conference team for their organization and preparation to host Entrelib 2022. And I particularly appreciate the expansion to be inclusive of an international audience. And I think that's particularly relevant as we have a conversation about the UN Sustainable Development Goals and their scope in uniting us as a global community working together. I'm delighted to participate this evening for me. However, I must admit, I had hoped to join the event live, but I'm here in a pre-recorded format to share my experience with you and in developing a program to support student entrepreneurship in regards to the SDGs. But I would love to engage in these conversations further. So my contact information is available at the end of the slides, and I'd be more than delighted to connect with you after the event. So again, thank you to the organizers for their flexibility and understanding, and for a wonderful program that we are all engaged in. A quick roadmap for our session today is first that we're going to look a little bit at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, what they are, and give a little context to entrepreneurship and librarianship related to the goals, like how they can be a framework that unites us. And then I want to share examples of how, an example of how I've integrated the SDGs, how I didn't integrate. I worked as we integrated collectively the SDGs into our first year pitch and business plan competition here at the University of New Hampshire, and how as a librarian, I created tools to support the student experience and research in that area. And then I thought collectively, we can consider ways that librarians can be part of the social entrepreneurship program and think about that in terms of our own personal sustainability and bandwidth, and the needs of our community and how we can scale that work to be inclusive and sustainable. So that is my direction for the evening, and I hope that you will find it engaging and helpful. So first, just a brief introduction to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. They were launched in 2015 as a set of goals that 17 goals that are a collection of interlinked global goals intended to reach a global audience and create a framework for us to work together as a global community to achieve these goals by 2030, which is a very ambitious direction. But each goal has specific targets and indicators that are used to measure the progress, and they have a lot of interconnections to each other, such as things like affordable energy, being able to be tied to infrastructure or sustainable communities. But these goals encompass so many parts of our life in our own individual communities and as our collective community here on the planet. Many of the goals have already been in practice by social entrepreneurs, of course, over the last 7 years since they've been introduced, but really over time, social entrepreneurship has focused on similar topics. So as you can see, that this impact of social entrepreneurs isn't using the language of the SDGs as its framework, but it's really touching on these different areas. So for example, one SDG 6 is clean water and sanitation. And we see here eco solutions is also clean water and sanitation, hygiene, and then things like sustainable housing, which maybe is covered in building sustainable communities. And we look at things like education, and we see that there's an SDG number 4 is quality education. So there's already a lot of deep impact that social entrepreneurs are having in our local and global communities, but maybe not necessarily in the framework of the SDGs. However, the SDGs do give us a framework to take forward and help us give context to our work and help us unite the work. And one way I found this for my own framework to be helpful is thinking like, what is my role as a librarian in supporting the SDGs? What does that do? What does that look like in my involvement with my business school? And specifically, how do I bring them in conversations with entrepreneurs, particularly student entrepreneurs in my institution? And so a couple examples was the Dubai Expo in 2022 had a real focus on entrepreneurship and innovation to support the SDGs, and particularly talking about the role of entrepreneurs to affect the SDGs in a particularly impactful and strong way, and emphasizing the role of female entrepreneurs to do that work as well, and trying to create spaces and resources to support it. Secondly, I was thinking about how business schools maybe have a role with the SDGs. In my own business school, we've been having this conversation recently, which started out of this program I'm going to talk to you about today. But the AACSB, a major accreditor of business schools, has said that many business schools are uncertain about their best way to approach the SDGs. And they recommend that administrators of business schools should involve the community with the school's effort and integrate the SDGs in all aspects of campus life. And that comment to me stood out as like, that is a way as a librarian engaged in business, economics, and entrepreneurship, that I could integrate my work into the SDGs with the business school. And librarians are not, we're not unfamiliar with the idea of supporting our communities. There's a wonderful interview with 3 librarians who are engaged in social entrepreneurship, are engaged with the SDGs through IFLA and other efforts. And they, Dr. Deborah Rowe mentioned that, libraries are a key resource in academia, and I would extend that to our communities. They're a place where we educate and grow our students, our communities, our faculty, and it's also a place where we can, it's a laboratory for curiosity, for creation, for innovation. So the SDGs offer us this framework to help support that growth and partner with other people. So we can partner with, our business schools and our other academic units on campus. We can partner with our communities, and we can partner with kind of, our global community, all in this framework of the Sustainable Development Goals. So I'd like to just pause for a moment for reflection and ask you to consider one way your work as a librarian can engage with the SDGs to support the entrepreneurship ecosystem. And I'm going to give you a minute to think about maybe something you are already doing that that could help with that. Okay, so now we'll transition into discussion about, excuse me, about the work that I'm currently doing at the UNH, University of New Hampshire, Peter T. Paul College of Business and Economics, in our program called the FIRE program. And the FIRE program is near and dear to my heart. I have been working with it since my arrival at UNH in 2016, and it has always been a program that had deep connection with librarianship because it is a first-year innovation and research experience. And the program is kind of has some unique tenets. It's usually has about 500 or 550 students enrolled. All first-year students in the business college enroll in the program, and they work in an integrated, team-based experience. It's an integrated and team-based experience, and guided by alumni and peer mentors. And it helps the first-year students really engage with the campus and have student success, but also developing good habits, academic and social and personal, to give them strategies for success while they're here at UNH. But the program is also really shaped by these student teams. So of the 500 plus students, they're usually in about 30 to 35 teams throughout the year. And they develop a business solution to a grand challenge facing the world. And they do that through research, through networking, and through collaboration. And one of the main program goals is, how to present a business plan and how to present the corresponding research. And so it's really a natural relationship for the librarian to integrate in. And all of this year-long program and learning and research and learning networking and exploring problems in the world culminates in creating a business plan and then pitching that through an oral pitch and a poster competition that we hold at our undergraduate research conference in April every year. And I'll give you, so that's a little bit of context of what the FIRE program is. It's a large group of students engaged in thinking about social challenges that face the world and how to create business solutions to solve them or to help work towards them. But this year we decided to frame it a little bit differently. And part of that is that conversation I just had where the SDGs really provide a global framework for us to work together. And so in this space, the SDGs have become our grand challenges. So in the past, we would work on a theme of potential topics, and the students would select them. And so every spring we would brainstorm ideas that that maybe relate to social entrepreneurship and how and a scale on which we could measure. So maybe it's like, regional, creating a business that solves a regional problem. But this year we decided that as an institution, we really need to have a commitment to the SDGs, both as a business school, as a university, and as individuals working in education. So we selected the SDGs as our grand challenge. However, 17 seemed like an unwieldy amount to approach in 1 year. We normally have 5 topics. So we decided that we would integrate the SDGs in and allow students during their orientation to rank their top choices and select the 5 areas that interested them most. And we would use those 5 areas in this year to be their frame for their business development plans. So the 5 that students selected to focus on this year, and I love to emphasize that this is the students who are going to be developing the business plans and these ideas and working over the course of a year on it. These are their choices, and I love to see what interests them and understand their passion and their motivation. So their number 1 was no poverty. Number 2, zero hunger, a quality education for all, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, and then climate action. So those are the five areas we're focusing on currently. And really, again, this was to emphasize that it's part of our strategic work, particularly business schools and in higher education, to think of the impact businesses can have to help the world accomplish and reach the Sustainable Development Goals. And then also to help think of social entrepreneurship for these students as valuable to their community, but also recognizing that they're global citizens and their impact can have impact in both their local and their global community. So what kind of support do I provide to help all of this happen? So I have it kind of broken down into 4 areas. One is that these first looks, or the research guide, a LibGuide. Second is 2 digital badges that are based out of modules in Canvas. So students do some modules, they earn a digital badge, and I'll go into detail about those. We do some train the trainer sessions, and then we do some research team consultations. And so this starts in August and goes through March. So it's throughout the whole year, but it's spaced out, August, October, February, March, September. And then, as I mentioned, back in May, we sort of select the topics. So it is a commitment, but as I mentioned earlier, I want to focus on ways that that we can also think about the sustainability of what's scalable for us as librarians to offer support. I am in the role of being the only librarian who works in business and economics at my university. So I always have to think about how does this balance with all the other student needs, and how can I use my time most effectively to help as widely as I can. So the first area I want to talk about are our first looks and our research guide. And the first looks are literally a first look. It's just an intro, bullet points, kind of some major themes on a topic, and the students get exposed to that before they even really get into this LibGuide. So this year, because the UN Sustainable Development Goals have so many incredible resources already in existence to help support understanding of the topics, I used their own infographics and work as a foundation to how to help curate resources to help the students. So this is our library research guide, and this is the core foundation of what I use for the first looks, and also to help them through that first semester where they're looking at the lens of these 5 grand challenges. They're looking at them through the lens of like technology, of economics, of science. So they've got different ways that they're thinking about all of these topics before they even consider what the business solution might be. They need to learn about the context of the problem. So this research guide is designed, of course, we have, advanced searching, basic searching, a connection into all of these kind of market research tools that we work with entrepreneurs so regularly. And but we have every category of every SDG that they've selected, we have topics to help them think through, and in multiple ways. So we've got, infographics from one of our databases. We've got, statistics and facts, topics that look at it from a variety of perspectives. We've got different types of media, TED Talks, other films and podcasts, some books, and then each Sustainable Development Goal has its own infographic developed by the UN, which is a great resource for educating ourselves and kind of having some fast facts or first look talking points, so we can see kind of the current status of where each Sustainable Development Goal is. And again, as a librarian, thinking about my own sustainability and what my workload might be like, pulling on these incredible resources already in this established framework is a way to help the students familiarize themselves, but also to make it work that is that I'm capable of providing support to. So the students use these SDG focused pieces really heavily in the fall, and then in the spring they rely more on the business plan resources and the advanced searching, which takes them out into articles and databases as they work on developing the business aspect of the project. And that's something else I think is really important, is we establish the conversation about research and what the context of research that we do in social entrepreneurship. The second area that I integrate in with the students is I have two learning modules that I have them work through, one in the fall and one in the spring. And as I said before, there are about 30 sections of students enrolled in this program. So that would be a lot of instruction for one person. So I've created these to help them have training in research. And as their first year students, they are all coming from different backgrounds and different perspectives, different areas of New England, of the United States, of the world. And I don't know what their experiences have been with libraries and research and business research. So training and research is what we focus on. And we want them to have kind of what we call basics. So understanding, where is the library? What does the library do? When is it open? Who's your librarian? What's a little bit about research? And then, the introduction that there's specialized business research tools that will support them in this program and also throughout their career as students here at UNH and as business professionals. So the self-guided modules are embedded into their Canvas page, and as they earn them, they earn a digital badge that they can share out as proof of their experience. But it also gives me a scaffolded way to be sustainable in terms of my own bandwidth of instruction and impact with the students. And then in the spring, we focus in more specifically, again, because we're focusing on helping them develop a business plan first, first to understand the context of the problem that they're working towards helping create solutions for, and then helping them understand what type of research they have to do to create that business plan. So in the spring, they learn about industry information, they learn about competitor information, they learn about consumer information to help them answer the specifics of how their business will be structured and what they do and who they serve, in addition to all of that SDG focused research that they do in the fall, where they are learning the context of the problem, so they can really create a better solution to help the world. Another area that I work on with the students is in the context of their peer advisors. So these are train the trainer sessions, and I meet with these FIRE peer advisors twice, once in the fall and once in the spring, before these digital badges are launched to the students, before those modules are launched. I meet with the trainers, the peer advisors, and I talk to them about their developing research skills in 2 areas. And again, these are first-year students trying to help them tailor to what they're doing in this program, but also research skills that are going to help them throughout their academic career and beyond. And the first step of this, I think, is really important to consider is that they have to research and they have to have skills to understand the context of their sustainable development goals. So like, what are the key issues, and having data or information that helps tell the why of the story. And when they get to that final pitch and that final poster for their business plan presentation, they need to have a way to explain the context of what their business is aiming to solve or contribute to. And that research skill is important to develop. It's because it's different types of data than they're going to do in the area where they're looking at developing their business plan, where they're focused maybe more on market research or financial research, or thinking about investors. Any of those sort of more quote unquote typical business resources. We want them to develop skills in both of these areas, to contextualize problems and also to have access to the resources that help develop a business plan. So these train the trainer sessions are really important, and I actually also use them in my work with like our Small Business Development Center or Entrepreneurship Center on campus, because there are advisors that work closely with the entrepreneurs and the small business owners themselves. And if I can help them know what data and information are available, they have such a close relationship with those individuals, so they can bring me in as needed or know how to make recommendations about what type of data we might be able to help them find. And I think that relationship building is a really important part of supporting student entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship in general, because it's an iterative process. As you can see throughout this year that I'm working with the students, there's many touch points we have together. It isn't just a one-shot experience. And I think that's a successful structure, but it can also mean, having to have ways that it can be scaffolded to support the work of the organization and the way that it is staffed. So the trainer sessions happen. And then finally, I meet with each research team in a consultation workshop. And to make this productive, they already have their business or product idea. It might be a product, it might be a service. They've done some pre-work to develop that. And so when they come and meet with me, we have hands-on time working through those market research questions, and also making sure they have data and information that supports the storytelling of and an understanding of the issues behind their SDGs. So then the students leave that session with 8 to 10 resources, because that's what their assignment is, 8 to 10 resources to continue developing their business plan. And those workshop consultations are usually 3 to 4 teams of student entrepreneur researchers and me, and I work with each group over the course of an hour and float around the room and answer questions and help get them directed. So it's been an effective way to do that as one librarian supporting these many students in this program. And then finally, let's take another pause, not finally, but let's take a pause together and think about what are some of the considerations or steps that could help librarians build their capacity to work as part of the social entrepreneurship ecosystem. So just pause for a moment and think about what are some of those factors that might influence your own work and your own ability to do this work, and what are ways that we could work to overcome them to be part of the social entrepreneurship ecosystem. As you think of these things, I have some ideas that I think might be helpful in creating that model of support for the entrepreneurship ecosystem. And some of those things are that I think it's really important to recognize the iterative process of entrepreneurship, that it's an idea developed over time. And as we learn more information, we refine the model. And so there isn't one touch point. And as librarians, a lot of times we are engaged in something that does have one touch point. We are often engaged in instruction in a one-shot scenario. And I think one reason that this program is so successful for our students and is that they are passionate about what they're learning. They get really excited and really interested about the social aspect of creating businesses to help the world have more sustainability, to have better access to food, for people to have better living conditions, to have more equality, to have more reliable transportation infrastructure, any number of these things that improve our world. The students are very passionate about it. And so that passion equates to needing time to continue to develop and refine their ideas. And so understanding that this support is going to be iterative, that it isn't going to be a one-shot session generally, and that a key component of that is building relationships. And entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, is really about relationships with the community. And so we can model it as librarians back, that building a relationship with our community, with our students, with our social entrepreneurs, to help them feel supported and help them have that sustaining relationship, so that as they go through this iterative process of developing a business plan and an idea, that they have their relationship with their librarian to come back to get information, to work through their ideas, and have touch points on how to keep that synergy flowing for them. Which can be challenging. And when I think about sustainability in terms of our careers, many librarians I know are have more work in the day than there are hours to do. And I feel similarly frequently. And so I try to think about proactive ways to do this. And I think when we talk about sustainability, right? These sustainable development goals are all about sustainability for our planet. We do have to think about our individual sustainability and what we are capable of doing. And I think that developing a sustainable model of how to have those relationships and how to support that iterative process requires intention and practice. So I've been doing this program for 6 years, and not every year was a sustainable development goal, but was always focused on social entrepreneurship. And this year we've changed that model because we want to have a better framework for being part of a global community to help with sustainability. But for myself, it meant like I had to overhaul a lot of resources, and I had to educate myself about materials that I was less familiar with. So I needed to have structure for that. And some of the ways I've structured the program to be helpful to me, to be kind to myself in my work capacities, are things like asynchronous learning modules for the students, because I can't go into 70 additional classrooms just focused on this one class, right? I have all the other courses to support in the program. In the college. So I need to have a way that I can make this sustainable. And so one way I do that is through the learning modules, so that the students can learn about market research from the industry, from the competitor, and from the consumer perspective. They have a module where they go through and learn about each of those things. They take quizzes, and that exposes them to the idea. And then when they meet with me in the research one-on-one, we have really impactful experience, because I'm focused specifically on small groups of students, but they've already had some familiarity with the concepts of that work. And then another way is the train the trainer model, right? That I can meet with the 2 groups of the 30 peer advisors, as opposed to meeting with 30 classrooms full of 20 or 25 students, and having that repetition, but also the bandwidth of time that requires. So sustainable models can equal long-term success in my book. But I also think two things that are really important when we think about creating the model for support for social entrepreneurship ecosystem, and in my context here of student entrepreneurs, is that not only do we need to help people navigate business information, which can already be quite a challenge, is that we need to help them navigate how to tell their story and give context to the challenge or the situation that their business plan is going to help improve. And so it's kind of two sets of resources, or maybe two, similar research skills, but have maybe some different outcomes. Searching for financial information, or for, potential investors, or what percentage of market share a company has in an emerging space is very different than the types of resources we might go to find out, what's happening in the ocean with sea life and sustainability and pollution and microplastics. So being able to help teach that set of skill so that there's good data and information to support the entrepreneur and their storytelling and their learning about the context of a problem in addition to that business information. So thinking about how we do that in a sustainable way for ourselves, in an iterative way where that we're not going to just have one touch point with those entrepreneurs, and that a lot of this really is focused on relationship building, as are the Sustainable Development Goals. We're building relationships as a global community to overcome challenges together, and they are a framework to help us get there. So it's been really delightful to watch the students grow and progress through this over the course of the year. And I have a few resources here for further information, a little bit about the SDGs, the research guide I shared, a research guide that came out of building that research guide with our business school administration, where we have now teaching resources for faculty on each of the 17 SDGs. And then a couple interesting articles thinking, again, that context of why SDGs, why are they important to entrepreneurship? Why are they important to business schools? Why are they important to libraries? So a few articles to share here. I thank you so much for your time with me this evening. I thank you for your considerations of my questions, and I look forward to hearing from you. Please feel free to reach out and contact me at any point. And again, a very deep gratitude to the organizers of this event for a wonderful slate of speakers and interviews, and for expanding the context of our thinking about entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship more globally, and putting ourselves in that framework of learning. So thank you all. I wish you well, be well, and take good care.
Thank you so much, Wendy, for sharing your knowledge. We are slightly past time. I will now pass time to Jay to introduce our lightning round speakers.
Thank you, Edward. I'm Jay Lyman, librarian with Seattle Public Library, and I'm excited to present our lightning round speakers this afternoon or evening or morning, whichever it is for you. I'm going to go ahead and share the names of all the lightning rounds, and then we'll jump into those. So first up, we have Annette Bochenek, assistant professor and business information specialist at Purdue University Libraries and School of Information Studies. Then we have Megan Janicki, Deputy Director and Strategic Initiatives of Strategic Initiatives at the ALA, American Library Association. Then we have Hadisa Saadu, Small Business and Nonprofit Specialist at Kansas City Public Library, followed by Aditi Gupta, Engineering and Science Librarian at the University of Victoria, Rich McHugh, Digital Scholarship and Commons Manager at the University of Victoria Libraries, and Emily Nickerson, Law and Business Librarian at the University of Victoria Libraries. And that is quite a group. We are in for a treat. So I'm thrilled that you're all here, and we look forward to hearing from each of you. So let's jump right in with Annette.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks so much for the introduction. I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen really quick here and get started. Excellent. So thanks so much. As mentioned, my name is Dr. Annette Bohenek. I'm an assistant professor and business information specialist with Purdue University. And the focus of my lightning round talk is about different podcast resources for entrepreneurs. So really the background in terms of this presentation, it comes from a podcast that we've already been doing here at Purdue University called Make Your Story. This year, we've started our second season or second year of the podcast after the first season really focusing on trying to get our students and our immediate community interested in podcasting and ideally interested in developing their own podcasts. So our rationale was essentially initially to showcase the maker spaces here at Purdue. And then of course, COVID-19 happened and that complicated a lot of students and people's ability to come to the actual maker space and continue using our actual facilities. But our thought was that even though there were these restrictions in terms of using the physical space, during that quarantine period, that process of creation and making never really stopped. But in some cases, caused students to use different resources or to create things differently or even craft things in some cases and continue being creative about this idea of making. So we really wanted to highlight our community of makers in the end. And so ideally with the interest in podcasting too, we thought that there was a story behind these different makers and projects and items that were being developed and created by makers of all kinds. And with that in mind, we thought that the podcast itself would be a great medium to tell a story about how something was created or how something was made. So initially, our first season of the podcast emerged from a partnership between Purdue University's libraries. We have several on campus and several maker spaces, as well as a partnership with our School of Communication to develop this podcast series called Make Your Story that celebrates the different stories of makers and the idea of making. And that first season focused more so on talking about the elements needed for creating an engaging narrative podcast. So our breakdown was essentially to release 2 episodes per semester that focused on different core characteristics of narrative podcasts, be they discussions on interview skills or the creative use of sound to enhance a story, etc. And now we are in this second season where our goal is namely to highlight these different stories of making from students. Now that things are a little less restricted than they were in years past. And that in and of itself has a pretty broad range in terms of the use of 3D printing. We have a soybean competition on campus that celebrates different inventions and innovations through the use of soybeans and alternative uses for them, as well as students who are cooking, students who are developing TikTok content and other creations beyond that. And so really, we want to also expand this idea to the different entrepreneurs that Purdue University serves. And this is not a season or anything in the podcast just yet, but we feel like a lot of the information that we've been bringing to students in terms of creating a podcast, especially for those who are curious about creating their own podcast, can also be applied to the different stories for entrepreneurs. A lot of entrepreneurs are also makers in their own right, and a lot of entrepreneurs have really interesting stories behind their business in general. So really with helping entrepreneurs, we'll walk them through these different topics and ideas, such as what in general they have in mind for a potential podcast that they'd like to highlight, and how they can take this idea of some sort of a broad topic and narrow it down into a more focused area, as well as looking at what information already exists on the subject and really concentrating on where they can fill in that gap with some new information. And so in addition, with creating a podcast, having entrepreneurs think about what contributes to their specific area of interest or niche, and looking at any key players or other content creators in that arena and thinking about how their approach is different. Does their subject have longevity? And if there's even room for collaboration in the case that there are maybe other creators who do share some common interests with their ideas. So there's a huge element of exploration that comes into play here, and this, as a business liaison librarian, is really my time to highlight the different resources that libraries can potentially provide in for these entrepreneurs in the development of a podcast. And this could be pointing them to other business databases, for example, to get them to better understand their audience. So looking at market research databases as well as industry databases too, to try to research those groups and industries further. We could also, as mentioned, seek opportunities for collaboration. So if there are internal, say, organizations or internal speakers rather within their organization that they can see themselves partnering with or highlighting within their podcast, that is something to explore, as well as the possibility of actual organizations. So within Purdue, we have many different campus organizations, cultural institutions, and other points of interest on campus and speakers that could also offer this chance to collaborate. And then also the possibility of connecting with different trade organizations too. So if there are other speakers, say within certain trade associations, that could also be great contributors to look into that possibility and to try to use those resources to further build relationships. And then we also offer a lot of information too in terms of the development and marketing of a podcast. This is where we start to get into technology. We'll recommend, say, certain pretty basic tools and pieces of technology for recording a podcast, whether it is maybe from home or from a studio or on site. There are some travel options too and pieces of technology that could also be used, as well as looking at different hosting and editing platforms, some paid for, some not, and the possibility of transcription as well to offer the chance to connect with an audience that is even broader, maybe one that's not able to necessarily listen to the podcast, but would enjoy engaging with a transcription, for example. And so looking into those services, as well as marketing, which in and of itself could be a challenge as well. So thinking about self-promoting or using a team, if there is, say, a marketing department they can rely on for this purpose, and developing a rough plan for marketing and trying to stick with that as best as possible. And then really going hand in hand with the marketing, developing that routine. So thinking about when to release episodes, how and when to market them, as well as being present for your audience. So thinking about where it is you want to be present, where it is you want people to find you, to continue building a relationship with an audience, and thinking about how to centralize their work. So ideally, maybe having a website that functions as a central hub for any information pertaining to the podcast, and again, how to get audience members to find them, and working to promote their work on different channels and connections and wherever the business is present and wants their podcast to be present. So there's a lot more information in relation to this subject. I certainly invite you to visit our website for the Purdue Make Your Story podcast. This will take you to our central hub for the podcast. And in addition to that, we also have a resource guide too that goes into some of these thoughts for how to develop a podcast, as well as going into some of the different previous podcast episodes recorded and the different resources and tools that we discuss therein. And I'm certainly happy to chat about this further and answer any questions as they arise. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak about the Make Your Story podcast and podcast resources for entrepreneurs.
Thank you so much. And next up, we have Megan. Megan, are you ready to go?
Yeah. Let me just share my screen. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Good evening, good morning, and thank you for having me. My name is Megan Janicki. I am the Deputy Director of Strategic Initiatives with the Public Policy and Advocacy Office at the American Library Association, based in Washington, D.C., USA. So today I'm going to give you a brief overview of some of our resources that we developed as part of our Libraries Build Business initiative, and give you an idea of how those might be able to support a library in expanding or building for the first time an entrepreneurship initiative. So just to give some brief background before I talk about the resources of what Libraries Build Business is in the first place. Libraries Build Business was a grant-funded initiative from the American Library Association, supported by Google.org, to partner with a cohort of 13 public libraries from around the United States, with a mission of creating promising practices and lessons learned for how to support small business owners and entrepreneurs, particularly those from underrepresented communities such as Black, immigrants, women, returning citizens, just to name a few examples. These programs were intended to be tailored to the needs of the local community, so they all looked a little bit different in terms of how they decided to offer programming, resources, services, and do outreach to their business communities. In the end, the initiative was nearly 2 years, about 18 months of funded, and we were able to impact nearly 15,000 entrepreneurs across the country. So the libraries ranged from large library systems such as Los Angeles Public in California to tiny rural communities like Topsom, Maine, or Independence, Kansas. This was also taking place largely during the COVID-19 pandemic, when a lot of libraries were only offering virtual services. So a lot of the libraries had to pivot to kind of offer these services. But even still, we saw such a great demand and a huge impact that people were participating in the virtual programming or coming to check out library equipment as they were able. And so, like I said, almost 15,000 people in that 18-month period. So the grant-funded portion of the initiative is over, but we do want to invest and sustain our work. So we have ongoing resources and a community of practice for practitioners, for people in the library field, that I'll tell you about now. So in addition to our goal of supporting small business owners and entrepreneurs, we aspire to support and advance the library field with promising practices and models, a community of practice, and resources based on what we learned. So with that, we offer a community of practice on Slack. Anyone interested in small business is welcome to join us there to talk with peers, ask questions, share resources and experiences, and join our monthly events. We do those on Zoom. I'll put the link to join our Slack channel in the chat after I'm done sharing my slides here. Truly anyone is welcome to join us there. Our book, Libraries That Build Business, was released in May 2022 and features more than 30 libraries from around the United States that are offering innovative practices for small business programs. The book offers practical how-to and step-by-step instruction, as well as inspiration for programs to adapt. This is available through ALA Editions, so you can find that. I can put the link to that as well, but that's an actual print book that you would order. And then finally, the 13 libraries in the cohort collaboratively developed the Libraries Build Business Playbook, a free resource to support libraries in developing, implementing, sustaining, and evaluating small business initiatives. That's available for free download. And again, I will link to this in the chat in just a minute. And I encourage you to check that out. That kind of shares the story of our initiative, but also has a lot of the different strategies for developing a bunch of different tools, including our evaluation tools, for people to kind of adapt in their context. In addition to all of these, there are more resources available on our website, including an initiative highlights report that shares the impact of libraries in the small business ecosystem with an external stakeholder audience. This is great for use with your partners, local business agencies, such as the Chamber of Commerce or small business associations, to kind of share how libraries can plug in and be a leader in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. We also have adapted our measurement and evaluation tools on the Public Library Association's project outcome. So you can make short, easy surveys that are geared towards your small business programs. And finally, our full impact report is also available on the website. So most of those are available for free download besides the actual Libraries That Build Business book. So I definitely encourage you to check those out if you're looking for resources to start or expand your program. Essentially, we believe all libraries, no matter their size or budget, can and should support small businesses and entrepreneurs. Depending on your capacity, there are various starting points to explore. This graphic, which is from our playbook, offers some considerations to help a library situate themselves. In many cases, by leveraging existing resources, libraries are equipped to support small businesses now. So truly, a really small library with limited capacity is maybe starting in the level 1, where you're assessing what you already have. That might be meeting space, internet connection, public computers. Those are all things that many libraries already have available, and kind of doing outreach and targeting the business community to let those know, to let the business community know that those are available and that you're welcoming them into your space. From there, you can kind of grow depending on your staff capacity, your budget, to by seeking partnerships in tier 2 to create dedicated programming or kind of curating a business collection. And then finally, depending again on your size, your staff, your experience with business, growing into that space where you're becoming a sustained leader in your community for supporting the small business community. You would have maybe a dedicated staff, dedicated services, a line item in the budget, all of these things that you can kind of count on being able to continually offer your programs and to evolve them for the changing needs of your community. So just an example of something that you would find in the playbook to use to kind of develop your program. That's all for me. Thank you very much. My contact information is there, the ala.org/advocacy/workforce/grant. That is the Libraries Build Business program page. All of our resources that I mentioned here are available there, but I'll go ahead and drop those links in the chat as well. Yeah, thank you. And I'll be happy to answer any questions in the chat as well.
Thank you, Megan. Next up, we have Hadiza. Hadiza, are you ready?
Yes.
All right.
I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, let's get this. Hello, everyone. I'm not sure what time of the day it is for you, but it's evening for me in Kansas City. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Hadiza Saadu, and I am representing Kansas City. I am the small business and nonprofit specialist at the Kansas City Public Library. So I know that we've heard from quite a few academic librarians. So the scope of the focus of the people that I work with is the general public, as indicated by the fact that it is the public library. So tonight I'm going to talk about one invisible barrier to capital access. I know that this says barriers plural, and I apologize if the title is a little bit misleading for what some of you might have expected. But Before I get into things, I want to talk a little bit about my role at the Kansas City Public Library. I actually started my position in 2019, and I'm on a team of different specialists called the Community Reference Team. So I just make up one aspect of our team, which includes our health and wellness specialists, our legal and government specialists, and our career development and financial literacy specialists. So oftentimes we collaborate because patrons have multiple different needs. And we're also working with our outreach team who works with patrons that are dealing with different life challenges. In addition to that, we're also collaborating with our RISE team who works with immigrant and refugee populations, which overwhelmingly are they're located in the northeast part of Kansas City. So I wanted to just give a little bit of context as to who the public library is dealing with in Kansas City. Kansas City is a very diverse city, but it is also plagued with the legacy of segregation and systemic racism. But before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit about one of the things that I hear most commonly from patrons. And this has remained consistent before the pandemic, and I was in my role for about a year before the pandemic hit. And I'm still hearing this question, and that is, this is from for-profit owners or people who are aspiring to open a for-profit business. How can I get a grant for my business, or any variation of how can I secure money that I don't have to pay back for my business? And so before the pandemic, the answer to that question was by and large, unless you are working in the tech sector and doing something very highly technical that the government might be interested in, by and large, we can't expect to find a grant for your small business as far as just like expecting that. There might be opportunities here and there, but we can't just expect that. So let's spend this time figuring out what other options exist and how we can get you ready for them, whether that's through understanding the tools that can help, that are available through our digital catalog, and or providing some kind of referral to a partner institution. So that was before the pandemic. But then once the pandemic hit, we saw quite a few grant opportunities open up. And this became especially true after the rounds of the PPP loan went out. And if you're not familiar with the PPP loan, that was the Paycheck Protection Program. A lot of small businesses did not get loans by and large, but even among the small businesses themselves, there's quite a bit of disparate impact or disparate realities. So according to PPP loan data, at the time, 68% of businesses that received a loan, or 68% of businesses in general were white owned, and 83% of those businesses received, or 83% made up the recipients of the PPP loan. So out of the total pool of funds that was available, 83% of those loans went to white-owned businesses, which made up 68% of businesses. By contrast, 31% of businesses were minority-owned, and they received 17% of grants. And then to drill in a little bit further within the category of minority-owned, 10% of businesses were Black-owned, but they only received 1.6% of the loans, which is quite stark. And you don't have to dive into this very deeply to really see that there was quite a bit of disparate disbursement going on. So with that reality in mind, I want to just kind of shout out Kansas City. We have a pretty vibrant entrepreneurship ecosystem that spans the for-profit and the nonprofit sector. And one organization that emerged from this reality is a group called Kansas City Gift. And what they do is they provide small business loans to Black-owned businesses located on Kansas City's east side, which has been historically under-resourced due to segregation. So they fund the grants through donations that are primarily coming from the public. The majority of the donations that they receive are from community members, and to a much lesser extent, they're receiving donations from corporations. So applications to the grants are available on a rolling basis. But in addition to the grants that they have available, they also offer a variety of small business support that's very tangible and it's free. In addition to that, they also provide opportunities for small business owners to vend at a monthly market called the Black Business Market. And there's a link to Kansas City Gifts located here, and you can take a look at that after this presentation. Okay, so moving forward. Just to highlight, what am I talking about when I'm talking about this barrier to capital access? I'm just going to read this on the right-hand side. Disparate access to reliable information creates an invisible barrier. So in the situation here in Kansas City, like I said before, segregation has had a very profound impact on who has access or more reliable access to resources that exist and who doesn't. So the impacts of redlining that have been exported by JC Nichols, excuse me, there's a lot of developers in Kansas City who are infamous. But basically the impacts of redlining have led to the reality that a lot of resources are concentrated in wealthier parts of the city. And so this reality was actually something that guided me in the early days of my role when we had in-person programming, making sure to place programming in locations where there's a lot of small business activity, but there's not nearly as much related to the amount of activity happening. There's not nearly as much small business education and programming happening that's quality or even happening at all. And so as a result, what we get is disconnected networks. So what that means is we have networks in Kansas City of business owners and aspiring business owners who do not have access to warm referrals, meaning somebody who can introduce them to somebody else by name and talk a little bit about what this person does and really facilitate a connection. People do not have access to those warm referrals to institutions that can provide more specialized support or resources. So either that doesn't exist or it's very rare. But in the situations in which a connection is made through somebody's own will, a lot of the times what ends up happening is the relationship breaks down between the institution and the individual due to misunderstandings of less represented communities and just lack of cultural awareness, which also fuels a power imbalance and a lack of engagement on both sides. So this is where I come in. And I'm going to dive a little bit deep into what it's like to work with me if you are a business owner or a nonprofit who says, I am looking for funding and I don't want to have to pay it back. Or I'm looking for financing. So any form of capital. So generally speaking, after we go through the reference interview, I'm sitting down and I'm working with the individual and I'm basically walking them through this kind of series of questions to ask yourself. So before securing capital, what do I need? The first thing that I need is good information. And I need to be aware that I need that information. So if they're already at the library, they're in good shape that way. But part of my job is also to try to find those people that don't necessarily think of that first. And that ends up becoming a collaborative process with the other internal groups at the library, as well as external groups. And a little bit related to that is, after I've got good information, what else do I need? Especially if I'm looking for a grant. I need a solid network, which means I need referrals, which is another aspect of where I come in. Part of my job is to make sure that I have active relationships with community partners, which I'll get to in a little bit. And then last but not least, and this is something that isn't necessarily thought of, but something that I do need is advocates. And the first advocate needs to be myself. So buzzing through this, what this leads to are the three different areas in which my roles as the business librarian kind of fall under. So the first one is I am the illuminator and guide for patrons who are looking to start a business or nonprofit. So what I'm responsible for and what I do on a daily basis is disseminate relevant and actionable information. And I adjust that information and how it's presented based on who I'm talking to. So it really is just being able to understand their needs and where they're coming from and what barriers might even exist as far as just being able to meet. Then from there, I am also the connector and collaborator. So this is important so that I can have something to kind of fall back on when I don't have the expertise. So it's important for me as the business librarian who cannot really be the expert on all the little areas of starting a business, but other people can. My job is to make sure I have relationships with those people. I understand what they do, what their specialty areas are. I figure out ways in which we can collaborate. And then I can then hand off warm referrals, and then sometimes referrals come back to me. And then last but not least, I'm also a cheerleader and an advocate. So I want to just kind of preface this by saying I'm not a cheerleader in the sense that I am saying any idea is a great idea. I'm a cheerleader in the sense that I am encouraging people from all different backgrounds to have confidence and faith in their own abilities to find information and to establish relationships, which are two important skills to have as a budding entrepreneur. So in that, I have to be able to provide a trusting ear while validating their experiences that they've had with other groups and within their community as well. And then also just understand their needs, basically. And in that, when I can understand what their needs are beyond just, I need information about this specific topic within business, sometimes people have life challenges. And so if I'm hearing things like, oh, I'm not savvy with the computer, I don't like computers, that tells me I need to refer this patron to our tech access team to get more hands-on help in the tech arena, as well as refer them to other groups in the city that work on tech skills for people. Okay, so those are my roles. I am going to wrap this lightning round up by sharing my email address here. And I also wanted to talk very briefly about a podcast that we have just published that features myself interviewing 3 different Kansas City entrepreneurs who I have been able to cultivate a relationship on various bases through the library. Either they are a patron that I've worked with, or they represent a partner institution that I've worked with programming wise, or they represent a partner organization that I send referrals to. So in the case here, this is basically a limited podcast here with 3 episodes. The last episode actually features one of the founders of Gift, Brandon Calloway. And then Lolita Rucker is a patron that I worked with Pretty early on in the pandemic. And then Denitra Moore is a business owner who I worked with as part of a mentorship program that focuses on Black and Brown business owners. That was a partnership with an organization called Porterhouse KC and the other major library system here in Kansas City, Mid-Continent. All right, I will go ahead and stop my share there. And I am happy to answer questions in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was amazing. As another public librarian too, like, yeah, I love that slide that you talked about your roles. That was so cool. All right, next up, we have Aditi, Rich, and Emily. Are you ready?
Hi, everybody. I'm Emily. I'm going to get us started off here. We're all from the University of Victoria. And so to start us off, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing and how we started. And as you might be able to guess from the slide, it's all about collaboration. Innovation became a big priority at the University of Victoria in the last few years, and inspired by this new strategic priority and the literature and conferences like this one, Aditi Gupta and I set out to propose some workshops and supports from UVic libraries in collaboration with other campus partners. It wasn't all smooth sailing at first, with some initial pushback from other campus groups as to, why is this coming from the library, not from us? But eventually our persistence paid off. And about a year ago, we were invited to present as a pilot to student entrepreneurs as part of the Coast Capital Innovations program, CCIC, I'll be calling it from now on. So the CCIC is our on-campus venture incubator, which helps entrepreneurs get fundamental support and mentorship to take business concepts from idea to investor ready. They provide tools, expertise, and space on campus to help entrepreneurs develop their ideas, partner clients with advisors and mentors from outside the university who provide valuable input and connections. They also run business plan and pitch competitions every year. So Aditi and I, we invited along Rich McHugh to collaborate with us on the workshop, as all three of us had prior experience supporting campus entrepreneurs and ventures in our roles. And since the pilot, we've been invited back for each new cohort of entrepreneurs, roughly 3 times per year, one for each semester, and have follow-up consultations with student entrepreneurs. So, of course, some of our consultations don't come through the CCIC stream, but we make sure those students are aware of the supports available to them through this program. And the referrals, they go 2 ways. So my part of the workshop as the business librarian includes a focus on key databases from the library for industry and market research. For example, I give a demonstration of IBIS World and Statista. I also talk a lot about access to publications, both journal articles for that academic perspective, as well as popular business news and magazines available through the library, Forbes, Inc., Entrepreneur, that kind of thing. People are often really excited about that access. And then finally, I share resources for finding local statistics, consumer demographic information. So a couple of the ventures I've assisted with in the last year include a cricket protein pet food company and a plant-based dip company. And both ventures from UVic have benefited from the CCIC competitions and resources, and also have had consultations with me for research help. And for example, some of the questions I received from the DIPS group included finding statistics on the local market size, so just Victoria here, of the snacking industry, and then segmented into the hummus industry, and also the percentage of the market that identifies with a lifestyle of health and sustainability. So the SDGs and sustainability is another big priority at our university, and it's woven into a lot of aspects. Thus, you can see it reflected in some of these ventures. Passing it off to Aditi.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. So as Emily pointed out, my role at the university is as the engineering and science librarian. And so very much like Emily, I get a lot of students coming from the CCIC program. And sometimes these students are just looking to find out about their products or find out more information about prior art. So if they are, in the process of patenting something or looking at different patents, so they're not infringing on any intellectual property that's out there, they might get in touch with me just to search a couple of different resources. So I lead them through a series of different databases, such as the USPTO, that's the United States Patent Office's database. There's ESPASnet coming out from Europe. There's the Canadian Patent Database, and of course, Google Patents. So a combination of these databases usually will give them enough information to search for any kind of prior art, or like I mentioned, any intellectual property that might be out there about their products. Like Emily, I do have students getting in touch with me now through the program. Some of the students that I've helped, or student entrepreneurs that I've helped, will be looking for information, like I said, about the patent, but mostly about development or at the development stage. So I had a student recently from engineering who was looking for more information on patents related to an app that he was creating. And these were, this company usually will be providing monthly and weekly subscription meal plans to post-secondary students across institutions. And he was looking to develop these on multiple platforms. So we had a lot of fun actually searching for a lot of patents through that small research consultation that I had. And then I always send them off to Emily at the end in case they haven't done their homework with market research yet. The other student that I had was from biochemistry, and their main goal or purpose was to create something very similar to the COVID testing small test kits that we have. So they were looking for an aptamer-based biosensor that they're creating for a particular bacterial strain. And usually this would take about a month, somewhere between 3 to 4 weeks to get results back from the lab. But they're hoping that their sensor can actually, or their test kit can actually develop these results within 2 to 3 days, or sometimes even hours. So those are the kinds of, sessions that I've had. I've also had students come in to say that they have actually taken the patents and standards workshops that I've offered in the past, and now they're looking to actually patent the product. So one aspect of this, confusion or misunderstanding that we had at the university level was solved early on, where we kind of had this very clear objective that as librarians, we are not going to offer any kind of help related to patenting a product or any kind of entrepreneurship in general. We were going to use our expertise as librarians to just create a plan to get students more help to find resources and get them to the next stage of their actual process and researching their idea. With that, I'm actually going to pass it over to Rich, who has most of this fun part of the presentation to present.
Thank you, Aditi and Emily. I manage the makerspace in the library, and in our library makerspace, we provide student access to a wide range of equipment for prototyping and creating physical products. We also offer free Creative Commons licensed workshops to teach students how to use the equipment we loan, as well as software that can be useful to entrepreneurs. So the workshops include things like data visualization with Tableau, 3D design and 3D printing, laser cutting, video recording and editing, electronics for kits like Arduino, Internet of Things, Raspberry Pi, data analysis with Excel, which, surprise, surprise, is our most popular workshop. I never would have guessed that up front. And there are two primary ways that we market our makerspace tools and workshops to students on campus, including our entrepreneurs. And the first is we have an email list of 3,000 past workshop participants, and we use it to send one email a month, letting them know about upcoming workshops, events, job openings, things like that. The second thing that we do to market ourselves is when we are invited to be guest lecturers in 4-credit classes on campus, we always spend a minute or two at the beginning of the workshop to let them know what the makerspace has to offer them in terms of equipment and drop-in training. And the library really is perceived as being a welcome place on campus by all, regardless of their background or area of study, for what we found the two following reasons in conversations with students. The first is the library is perceived as common ground without formal attachment to any of the male-dominated departments on campus. And second, the workshop format we use to teach technical skills is taught in a low stakes way so that it doesn't put participants on the spot. And if they want, they can fade into the background or connect via video and keep their video off. And again, we've been talking to people who have attended our workshops. They found that neutral ground and the low stakes instructional format so they can learn to use these tools as things that they really appreciate. And this is one story from a couple of years ago that I really love. Paige Whitehead was a third-year microbiology and environmental studies student who loves music festivals, but didn't like all the garbage they create, and especially the toxic chemicals in almost all glow sticks. Paige first heard about our makerspace through a friend who took a workshop as part of one of her 4-credit classes. And she'd already started work on her biodegradable glow stick passion project, and she'd created the tube for the glow stick out of purified seaweed. She made the stopper on one end out of charcoal, and used the bioreactor on campus to concentrate bioluminescence from the ocean into a tablet form. And all she needed to now for her prototype was a cap so that she could show her prototype to potential investors. Paige didn't say anything to us, but she took our 3D design and print workshop, and a couple of weeks later and 5 more iterations, she was able to make a prototype cap that fit her tube perfectly. The cap was eventually made out of metal when she went into manufacturing, but that plastic cap helped her proof of concept prototype that she was able to take to investors, and made several prototypes on our 3D printers in our makerspace. And we are so happy that we could play just a really small part in Paige's story and help cheer her on as she continues to build her business. And you can see part of her website here. And Aditi has put the link to her business in the chat there. But these are the types of things that are really inspiring to me, and I think to others in the library, and how we can help the entrepreneurs in small ways. And getting the word out is probably one of the toughest problems that we've had. But these stories are always wonderful and encourage us to do more. And I think that's it for our presentation. So if there are questions, we'd love to answer them in the chat. But thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our lightning round presenters. Let's all give them a round of applause using our reactions in the chat here and in the reactions feature. I'm going to pass the microphone back to Summer, who's going to close out the conference.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you once again to all of our speakers today. Unfortunately, we will not be able to fit in our networking plans today because a few of our presentations went over a little bit in time, but I think we can all agree that the content has been fantastic in this part 2 session. It's been a great addition to our part 1 session. So thank you to those of you who were able to attend both sessions or even just one of them. Because we're not able to do the networking, I would highly suggest that you join our LinkedIn group so that we can continue to build this global network. And I just want to say one last thank you to our planning team members for pulling this event together. And thank you all for attending. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.